Hello and welcome to Cafetography.co.uk. Today we're looking at a fairly new and very unconventional lens, the Canon 8-15mm f4 USM-L fisheye lens. If you want a lens that will give you a new and unique perspective on almost anything you point it at, then this is definitely the one. It's designed for full-frame cameras, where you get the full effect of its unique design. The 8mm focal length provides you with full, circular, 180-degree fisheye images, giving you very dramatic images and video footage. But the coolest thing is that you can zoom in to 15mm, where you get a fisheye image that covers the full image circle, giving the lens a dual role. So this is an incredible lens for shooting inside any beautiful building, or if you simply want to embrace some new perspectives and get creative. The lens will also work on Canon's less expensive APS-C cameras, where the smaller sensor unfortunately crops out the circular fisheye effect. Here's the image on an APS-C camera at 8mm and zoomed into 15mm. So on an APS-C camera, you'll probably want to use this at about 10mm for the best effect. In fact, for convenience, the lens has a limiter switch which prevents you going past 10mm. But due to the lens's very expensive price, it's likely that people with full-frame cameras will form the majority of this lens's owners. Let's look at the lens's build quality. It's quite small and very solid, and clearly built to a very high standard. The zoom and focus rings are both extremely smooth. As you can see, the beautiful front element is highly exposed, so you'll have to handle this lens very carefully. The lens does come with a little lens hood which offers some protection. However, it causes vignetting on a full-frame camera when you zoom wider than about 10mm, so it's likely you'll want to leave it off. The lens cap is a little flimsy and it comes off quite easily in your kit bag, so that's the only real fly in the ointment. But another positive is that there's a gasket at the back of the lens to give you better weather sealing, and there's a slot behind the rear element for gel filters, if you want to use them. The autofocus motor on this lens is very fast and silent in use, and proved to be very accurate as well. Overall, the lens is built extremely nicely, although you'll have to be very careful not to scratch that beautiful front element. It's a bit of a challenge to test the image quality of such an unconventional lens as this, but let's take a look at sharpness levels. We'll start on a full-frame camera, in this case a 20-megapixel Canon 6D. At 8mm and with the aperture wide open at f4, we see fantastic sharpness, colours and contrast in the centre of the image. The sharpness is also very good in the image corners, although we can see some chromatic aberration or disturbing colours on contrasting edges. This is a bit of a shame, but it's also typical for a fisheye lens. Stop the lens down to f5.6 and the corners are as bright and sharp as they're going to get. Unfortunately, the chromatic aberration remains noticeable, even if we stop the lens down to f8. However, the picture quality in the middle of the image is still fantastic. This is a really great showing for such a unique lens. When we zoom in to 15mm, we basically see the same thing. Straight from f4, image quality is fantastic in the centre of the image and still very sharp in the edges, although it's a little darker from the effects of vignetting. We continue to see noticeable chromatic aberration. Stopped down to f5.6, we see much more brightness and a slight increase in sharpness, but chromatic aberration doesn't quite go away, even when the lens is topped down to f8. Still, it's a fantastic performance and you'll be getting very sharp images no matter what, and chromatic aberration can always be dealt with later using photo editing software. Let's take a look at picture quality on an APS-C camera, in this case an 18-megapixel Canon 60D. Most people will use the lens at 10mm, so let's take a look at that focal length. Just like on a full-frame camera, we see excellent sharpness in the centre of the image, and the corners of the image are almost as good, but unsurprisingly, there is still noticeable chromatic aberration. Stop the lens down to f5.6 for a little more sharpness and brightness, but even stop down to f8, the picture is still showing some chromatic aberration on contrasting edges. The middle of the image still looks fantastic. So it's much the same performance as on a full-frame camera. We used a full-frame camera to test the lens on our regular distortion chart and, well, you might possibly notice a little barrel distortion there. Zoomed into 15mm, we still see the deliberate fisheye distortion. It's quite evenly distorted in a very nice way without too much of a pinch in the middle. The lens allows you to get right up against your subject, leading to some extremely creative photos and even the possibility of out-of-focus backgrounds. The quality of the bokeh, when you can get it, is very nice. Another good thing is that the lens handles working against bright lights very well. In this footage, taken against the sun, you can only spot a tiny amount of lens flare and no real lack of contrast. Overall, this has to be one of the most fun camera lenses you could possibly imagine, particularly if you're using a full-frame camera. Just look at some of this video footage. The build quality is excellent, and the picture quality really is worthy of a Canon L lens, even with the noticeable chromatic aberration in the corners, which is typical of any fisheye lens. However, it is a very expensive lens indeed. You'll have to be very protective of its front element, and you'll also have to ask yourself, am I going to use this lens enough to justify spending about £1,000 on it? If the answer is yes, then you should get it without hesitation, as the lens will perform exactly as you want it to. But if you just want to use it for a special project or photo shoot, and that would probably be the case for most people, then we highly recommend renting this lens for whatever project you might be working on. You won't regret it. It's one of the most enjoyable camera lenses ever invented, and its unique and high-quality pictures could set your photography apart from the competition. It comes very highly recommended.